Hi, welcome to our podcast, Voices on the Edge of Change. My name's Robey and I'm Director at Women in Change. Today, I'm going to be talking to Christopher Harvey from Tesco, who heads up all things change. At the end of this podcast, I'm going to be giving you my reflections on what Chris had to say. But first of all, let's hear from our sponsor at Marlowe Consulting, Annette Andreasen.
Thank you so much, Lou. It's wonderful to be here. So Marlowe Consulting, we are a transformation specialist consultancy and our focus is on the people side of change. So we work with leaders to help them guide people through change. And then we work with people to make sure they are ready, willing and able to go through change. In terms of getting in touch with us, you can get in touch with us through our website, which is marloweconsulting.com. Marlowe's got an E on the end. Or feel free to drop me an email at annette@marloweconsulting.com. Looking forward to hearing from a few of you.
So, welcome to the Women in Change podcast, episode 1. We're absolutely thrilled to have with us today the Head of Change and Enabling Functions currently at Tesco, Christopher Harvey. Hello.
Thank you for having me.
We're delighted and I can't wait to get into the conversation. But we're joined with Annette Andreasen from Marlowe Consulting, who is not just here because she's interested in everything that you do, Chris. But she's here as our sponsor and for somebody who for the whole of Marlowe Consulting, have got behind us, and we're eternally grateful. So thank you, Annette. Welcome.
No problem. Lovely to meet you,
Likewise.
Chris. I'm really looking forward to having a really good chat today. Thank you, Lou, for inviting us both.
No, not at all. I know that, our listeners won't know this, Chris, but I'm going to start with the power of LinkedIn.
Yes.
Yeah, and what a tool that's suddenly become since COVID, because I think we all just thought it was a funny Facebook thing when it arrived.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that right?
Safe the way you have to behave. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But what truly impressed me, and I think one of the reasons why we actually connected, one in my role, obviously as Director of Women in Change, was actually, and and again, I'm sure Annette will have something to say on this, because when I first started talking to Annette's colleague who dreamed up Marlowe, with Deborah Feekins, who had worked with me actually for over 9 or 10 years, I would say that perhaps wasn't quite as enthusiastic at my work at Women in Change initially, and sort of felt that we should, quite honestly, and I understand, totally get it actually, why we should also have male allies or male people in the group.
Mm-hmm.
But actually we recognised that there was actually an awful lot of women in change that didn't actually have somewhere where they could come and feel safe and talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And what struck me when we connected on LinkedIn particularly was that what an ally you were for female game changers, actually, hugely. And that really stood out and struck me on your profile and the way that you wrote and what you said. And so, one of the reasons why I really wanted you on our very first podcast, because I'm sure nobody would have expected me to open up a Women in Change podcast.
Yeah.
Here with a man standing in front of me, with 2 women, I might add.
Yeah.
But how great that is. And I know, because you and I have got to know each other behind the scenes of this podcast, how absolutely amazing you have been to female game changers, to people in the industry. And as I saw you, and congratulations, big up to your team, were the winners of the best finance program and in change at the Women in Change Awards, which we had back in June. So, thank you for believing in us as an award giver.
Well, thank you for having me at the awards, because the award wasn't for me, right?
Right. Well, no, it wasn't. But
I was just glad to be there as one of the dudes in the room. It was nice.
And I will say, in case anyone's wondering, and you know this because we spoke about this as well, and Annette was a sponsor through Marlowe Consulting with Deborah and others, was that I actually had no part in deciding who won.
Of course. Yeah.
I'm just going to declare that.
And you were very, very discreet as well, Lou. I was very impressed.
Oh, I know. Gosh, I tell you, I was having to hide, I think, for a few weeks. I think the worst one was when I was trying to get one of the winners over from Northern Ireland. trying to get her on a plane when she didn't think it would be worth coming, without actually giving the game away. That was very difficult. But no, and actually, in fairness, Deborah Feekins, who's been behind this with Annette and many others at Marlowe, thank you, was an award winner too. So I just want to say that the love in the room is huge, and I'm immensely grateful. As I know Sarah Barlev, our CEO and founder, is extremely grateful for the support that we are having, actually, and continue to have. And we'll come on to that a bit later. But I'm eager now, really, to get into the insights and learning, because I do see someone in front of me, not just here today, but as I've got to know you, that's a real advocate for women. And there's a lot of things that I'd like to bring out within this podcast about why you felt that. So I've said already, you have an all-female team. Deliberate? Almost all, well, from what I've seen. So do you want to tell us a little about that? Was it deliberate?
Absolutely. So I think for context, when I sat down with 6 ladies from my team yesterday for lunch, I asked them the question. I said, I'm going on this podcast, going to be having a chat with 2 leaders within the change community. They both happen to be women in Change Network. It was very women-centric, and they're obviously looking at me. I'm quite clearly a guy. You can see that if you're listening. Maybe you can tell from my voice. And it was, what can I say about why women make the best change managers, or make good change managers? And every single statement that came back from the team was met with someone else in the team saying, well, if you say that, you might sound a little bit chauvinistic. If you say that, you might sound a little bit like a XYZ. And I was sat there thinking, oh dear God, what have I signed up for? and that, I think, first of all, I think that's part of the problem, part of the challenge, is to your point about creating a network where it feels safe for women to come and have a safe conversation. I think likewise, it has to feel, in order for us to achieve something special as a holistic group of talented people, be they male or female, we have to be able to have those kind of conversations. So we have to be able to enjoy and celebrate what makes all of this great and excellent. And that means sometimes talking about stuff that might be a bit uncomfortable, might be a bit awkward. And of course, anything I do say today is just my own views, I'll talk as freely and honestly as I can without putting my foot in it. But I think it's really clear for starters to say that men and women probably as well will always make mistakes in this domain of saying something that may come across to someone as being not offensive, unless someone sets out with intent to malice. It is a slightly fragile ground to be walking on. And so that's part of the reason why I wanted to come to this session, if I'm honest, was to challenge myself to be kind of enjoy and celebrate the success that we've had as a predominantly female team, which is great. Also to support the network, but also challenge myself to actually show other men, hopefully, that it's possible to have a very kind of open, transparent, free-flowing conversation on the topic that some men will probably run a million miles away from, out of fear for kind of saying the wrong thing.
And that's interesting, because we've made observations, Annette and I, through times that we've worked together, where you do notice that, and there are no actual statistics on this because I've been looking desperately, by the way. And if you find them, or if anyone else finds them on this podcast, we'd love to know them, where they're actually sitting. But I know, roughly we think 80% of the people that take a role in change, which is, and we'll get into, a fairly new role, because none of us grew up to work in change. We didn't even know about it at school, are women. And I don't know whether that, and Annette, you might have a view on this. I don't know whether that's because, and again, I might get into serious trouble for this comment, right? But women tend to be able to do more than one thing at once. I don't know whether it's because we've been brought up that we have to do more things at once and that we're not as linear. I don't know. But I'm just curious about what do you see in the fact that you have a majority team of women? So
when we say change for starters, I think we mean change management, right?
Yes, change.
Because there are 3 or 4 different professions in the change world where I would say that statistic would shift.
No, absolutely, yeah.
And that's why, so I think when we home in on change management specifically, you are looking at a certain skill set there that, when you say 80%, there's clearly a reason for that, right? Like statistically, it's not necessarily for me to diagnose that, but coming back coming back to why my team has ended up being predominantly women. If I go back to kind of day dot of like my education, I've gone to a very academic all boys school in North London, where there is actually a wall between the boys and the girls' school, and you're basically taught not to go near said wall because the people the other side of it are, not interacting with. And there was this whole kind of weirdness really around the fascination, but also kind of fear and awkwardness of like what women was all about, right? And you'd grow up kind of just learning about women through like my mum or my sister or movies, and I didn't have that same exposure. So when I went to university, I think I then naturally on my course became very, very aware that the women on the course were incredibly capable, incredibly like with vastly different views and outlooks of the world to me and what I'd been used to. And I started to realize that it's not just about the knowledge that you have and the facts that you sort of the content. It's also the manner in which you go about like conveying a message, how creative people are, how engaging, how warm and caring, all these different things. It's not to say that every woman is better at those things than a man, but I think that there are women that are able to bring something to the table that men more than often don't. And vice versa, I'm sure. When I started building my team, and I was thinking about this on the train journey here, I was thinking, what is behind why my teams have always been women dominant and why my bosses have tended to be women? What's drawn me towards that? I think for sure one of the things is my curiosity and desire to have voices in the room and ideas and inspiration around me that is different to what's going on in my head. And I think having an education that was so male dominant and having all my school friends that I'm still in touch with now, we all talk about, so I'm very sort of aware of what maybe a lot of men might think in a certain situation. And I've done enough roles in project management and change management and PMO to sort of broadly, and then I suddenly start working with and employing women and realizing just by total coincidence, I never set out to say I'm going to employ women and that's going to be my my MO in life. I'm going to build an all-female institution. But I certainly set out with my first hire, second hire, third hire in the last few teams I've built. They were always women. And it was always because I needed, when I'm building teams from scratch, I need a yin to my yang. I need something that is very different to what I already have in my own head, so that as quickly as possible, we can scale a team up to complete the kind of necessary outlook of whatever that may be. It's just coincidentally meant that they end up being female.
So it sounds like for you, Chris, it's much more about that diversity of thinking that you're trying to build into the team.
Yeah.
And so I think that probably brings us on to some of the other aspects of diversity and how that comes in. And is that something that you actively seek as well?
It clearly ends up being, but again, because as Lou points out at the award stuff, like the team is not just predominantly female, but we also have a real diversity of backgrounds, be that religion, be that ethnicity, be that kind of geographical location from even within the UK and different backgrounds, all sorts of different walks of life, people that have come from relatively privileged backgrounds, people that have come from challenging backgrounds. Like it's that diversity of thought that makes a good change team. And when I saw something, and I don't often quote Stephen Bartlett, but it feels like when you're doing a podcast, you have to.
No, we have to have something high to aim for here, Chris.
It's easier to quote someone than...
If you're listening, Stephen, this is our first podcast.
Stephen did say, I think it was this morning in his latest post, that did the one question, if you're going to ask yourself one question about who to hire or who to promote within your team, or indeed who to potentially manage out of your team, ask yourself, are they going to make an improvement to your culture or not? Because if they're not, like, forget about the skill set, the CV, everything. If they are going to hinder your culture, it doesn't actually matter what they bring to the table. They're not a good addition to your team. And that resonated with me so much in terms of, to your point about diversity of thought. It's about building a pool of thinkers, but also, like in parallel with that, is building a culture of the buzzword, obviously, psychological safety gets thrown around a lot.
Yes.
It's a term that I use a lot, but now it's become overused. I feel like I have to use new words to keep it fresh. But it's a safe, like you mentioned before we came on Luke, like a safe space.
Yeah.
A place where people feel like they can truly be themselves, the professional version of themselves, of course. We're not, going to turn up at work being like we would necessarily at Glastonbury. But
I don't know. I've seen people do that in the BBC.
I'm sure. And to be honest with you, that's one of the things that my team and we talk openly about, is how we have a lot more fun than a lot of the teams around us. And other teams look at us, and some people go, they don't do enough work, or they're joking around too much, or they seem too friendly, or blah, blah. And I just couldn't give two hoots about what other people think about my team, because the results speak for themselves. Not only are we doing amazing things like winning awards, but we're also doing amazing work that means I'm still in the same role 3.5 years later, because I'm so satisfied with what we're achieving that it's continually getting better and better and better. And the results, it's like economies of scale, like we're able to achieve even more because we've built and cultivated a culture that is so supportive and caring, and now we're finally starting to hire some dudes as well.
And that's important about when you talk about the dudes, because we had a conversation today, Annette and I, about how you foster bringing in new talent, but also how you bring in male people into an all-female environment, and what does that feel like, and what does that look like, and that's actually can be quite difficult. I know you and I had a little pre-chat of this podcast, and I asked you the question, do you think that you may work better with women? And I asked you the question because were you brought up in a big female household? And actually I think the answer was you were.
Pretty close to Mark,
yeah. You had quite a lot of female influence, I think. I also
call me a mummy's boy, yeah. Definitely. And I've grown up with, as I said, I think I've only had one male boss in my entire 18-year career. So I've definitely gravitated to I guess people would call it like a maternal way of leading. But ironically, that's also kind of interesting, because actually a lot of the female bosses I've had haven't necessarily had big families and lots of children. So it's not a given also that you've gravitated towards a woman just because of the kind of stereotypical traits of a woman. It's sometimes just brings out the best in you, and you bring out the best in them, and you get
chemistry.
Yeah, it's a chemistry. Yeah, like a really strong thought-leading chemistry.
And I truly believe that some of those stereotypes are starting to break down. I think that you are seeing more men bringing that emotional intelligence and more nurturing, coaching, developmental style leadership into the workplace. I'm certainly seeing that, not consistently. And I think more and more we are seeing that these leadership models are encouraging that type of leadership rather than the more classic male stereotype, dictatorial approach to leadership. And to Lou's point right at the start of the podcast, both Deborah and I from Marlow did have that instinctive, women's network. Surely we should just be encouraging people who want to do change, who want to build that change management profession, who are getting into that challenging perspective of leading change. And as we spoke to more men that we worked with, because we were very keen to get that perspective, they were saying, no, women still need that support and to come together and feel supported and have a place to talk about some of these things. So I still feel slightly conflicted in this. And I say that as someone who, we have 4 people on our leadership team, 75% women, and we're a change consultancy. But what we are seeing, I think, is that balance starting to come more into our team as well, of more men coming into the change space and doing a fantastic job of it as well, as you obviously do yourself, Chris.
Yeah. It's also, so the other way of looking at the diversity point is, so you've got your home team, right? Which my boss Jane, she always talks about your home team, your first team, and your first team is like the hand that feeds you. Like where's your clan? And the clan for us is our enabling functions team of delivery specialists, be that project, change, PMO portfolio. And then within that, of course, I've got my clan, my home team. But day to day, they're not working with me, right?
No. Yeah.
They're working in their change program.
Yeah.
So yes, we definitely want to see more, it'd be great to have more and more diversity within the change management profession. But in a way, what makes it such a value add is that we are always bringing something different to the program setup, where you've got a majority of the people are engineers, architects, product managers, project program managers, more male-dominated professions, statistically speaking. So in some ways, I think that's also why women end up making a really good addition to a program team and as a change manager or any role in technology. And I'm very equally as kind of endorsing and supportive of some of the, the tech data-driven women initiatives, because I think the more of that diversity that I've tried to build in my team that we can have in programs, the more successful the programs will be, which, let's face it, ultimately that's the aim. My team can be really successful as a team, great, but the business needs the programs to be successful for my value contribution to really convert into tangible benefit. So I think there's two battles to be fought there, kind of one in the discipline and one more broadly within the change portfolio domain, if you will.
And also, I'd just add, just for a women in change perspective, the irony, we have we don't more, but we certainly have a very high influence of male allyship in women in change than we ever expected. And if you take someone like Alexander Nicholas, who's the chief people officer of Virgin Pace, and he's been an incredible supporter, has been with us from day one. And actually, I asked him, I said, I'm curious, it's wonderful that you're with us the whole time, but like on every initiative, it's wonderful, but why? Not turning away any sponsorship, but why?
Yeah.
And he said, because I don't want to be one of those men that just come along at the end and say, they're great. I want to say I helped build it, that I helped build up, and that and he's got a very interesting story, because his story is that he's actually supported his wife to be a diplomat for her entire life, and he has upped and changed his job more times than you've probably sneezed at the moment.
Amazing.
And he's built his whole career with companies that support him to support his wife as a diplomat around the world, which is a whole other story, right? And phenomenal. But I think certainly what we've seen through setting up Women in Change, which is why we're here today, is that sense of actually it is about both. And I think I want to make that quite clear, because it's our first podcast.
Yeah.
But it's about how we lift women up, celebrate what they do. And I know somebody's probably thinking, well, what about binary, non-binary? Of course, we'll entertain all that. Absolutely, 100%. But at the moment, we are in the female game-changing market. And we grow, on average 4 or 5 members a day with no advertising, which is just still striking us as something quite unbelievable. So there's clearly a need and there's clearly a niche. And the other thing I'd say, and we saw it in the Kamala Harris speech, particularly last week with Michelle Obama and Clinton and others, was this sense of we're not going to compete, we're actually going to collaborate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there's something about how women become really great collaborators rather than competitors. I don't know what you're thinking now on that.
I was having a conversation with a female board member recently for one of our clients, and she said that the board had been very male-dominated, and it is striking how much the discussion of board changed when a couple more women came into the board.
Right.
So I think so much of it is about balance and bringing those different approaches. And if we are to go back to stereotypes, women do tend to, seek that collaboration. And I think that often men in senior positions, particularly probably of the generation ahead of me, were successful because of a certain style.
Yes.
And I think they were successful because they were assertive. They would maybe build a wall around their domain. They could then just keep working their way up an organisation, up to board level. I think what's now happening is you've got a real challenger situation where people are being successful with quite a different approach. And so women are now able to make their way up through organisations without having to adopt these very different styles that aren't natural to them. And therefore, you are getting these great conversations. I think your point about having women in those programme teams probably does change the conversations around those steering boards and around those programme meetings. and brings a healthy tension, I'd imagine. And I see it a lot when we go into programs, of bringing that people perspective to a program rather than the pure technical and process perspective.
Yeah, definitely that resonates. I think as you were talking, it was making me realize that a lot of what I'm here for, if I'm honest, is almost like accidental championing of women in change, because I never set out and went, this is something I want to make sure I nail. And like looking at like diversity within a board, for example, if I were a CEO, I wouldn't be looking at my board as numbers or quantums of ethnicities or genders or whatever it happened to be. It would always be based on what's best for the business. And I think I just know that what's best is a really diverse school of thought, and that when you have that kind of outlook, it's possibly then not something like, because it's come accidentally to me, it's possibly not something that I've been as forthright with in terms of like you're doing with driving an agenda to make a difference. And that's why I feel like I feel a sense of responsibility from today to maybe be a little bit more extroverted with why it's a benefit for diverse teams, because otherwise what you see as success in what I've achieved, that I just see as being like doing my job, I might not share that as to the maximum benefit that it could achieve, if that makes sense. I want to have a positive impact, but most things I've gone about in my career, I've sort of set as an agenda and gone, right, this year I'm going to achieve X, and this year I'm going to do this. And so to sort of, ever since we won the award a few months ago, it's just been resonating with me that I'm like, well, this is clearly something that other people see as being success. And how can I make sure that more, whether it's men or women, that more leaders in positions that have a chance to make positive change take that opportunity and do that? And don't just kind of assume that everyone is a good person and they're always going to make the right choices. Because the more I read and online, the more you see that's not the case. The statistics still show we're like miles off with equity and equality in certain areas. And yeah, sadly, yeah, exactly. And sometimes I just, because my daily life has always been working with so many brilliantly talented women, I haven't known any different. So I've just kind of always been very fortunate. Like our leadership team right now is at least 50% female. My peers that I work with day to day are, it's always just.
But there must be something about your own personality that you know, sort of. We talked about psychological safety, but that safety within you, that you're not intimidated by, because I've worked for women, which, trust me, we don't need to go down that road, right? But when I talked about women not being competitive, more collaborative, but when you get two women and there is jealousy, or, you know, I remember way back when I first started my career, I met this lovely director, unfortunately, I'm having a senior moment on his name, but the first thing he said to me is, if you don't take something from this job to your next job, Lou, I failed you as your line manager and as well as the director of this business. And I'm talking about when I must have been about 18 years old. So that is a huge memory to remember that statement. And I then thought, well, I'm going to say that to people, because if I haven't given you something, whether Annette's given me something from a contract I've done at Marlowe or whatever, that's something I think, oh, yes, I can use that skill. I could watch Annette in action, for example, and think, oh, I'd never thought about doing it that way. Something that you then take, but you've got to be very, you clearly are, you know, somebody that is comfortable with who they are, if you can bring and invite them.
Sometimes. If I were to be brutally honest, and I wasn't planning on going this deep today, but
okay. I didn't let you into everything I was going to ask you.
You're really getting to the core. You're going to try and make me cry, right?
No.
Is that mission accomplished when I start crying? Which is quite easy to do. So building on my whole school experience, like I was horrendously bullied at school in that environment, that male-dominated environment, and I'm not sure if that was the sole reason, but between that and family matters and my own kind of life experiences that took me on a bit of a roller coaster journey in my late teens and early 20s. Ever since that, I've multiple classifications of neurodiversity, if you will. to the extent that, you know, I talk very openly with my team and at work about, having like just my mental health is like a daily part of my ritual. Medication, therapy, lots of reading, going on retreats. Like as my wife knows, like my sort of wellbeing routine is incredibly important to me. And if I didn't have that and didn't have that time, I would not be able to function at my best. And so I think, I don't know, like for definite, but the more you ask the question about, there must be a reason because statistically my career has shown like a massive leniency towards a preference to work with women. And I think if I were to point at anything in particular, I would say probably that empathy and understanding of vulnerabilities is inevitably, in my experience, stronger in women than it is in, especially in the workplace, men that are bringing their more masculine traits to work.
Yeah,
It's not necessarily, I mean, you only have to look at male suicide rates to know it's fallen. So if we want to stick to the objective stuff rather than me hypothesizing subjective, I would say statistically women are probably a more embracing, safe environment to be vulnerable at work, not talking openly like I am now about kind of having challenges, but not fearing that if it ever came up, there would be any kind of retaliation, you know, that it would ever be used against you. And I've always had bosses, especially, that have, I felt, understood me for who I am and actually appreciated and not only like kept me around, but actually promoted me. I had one particular female boss back when I was working in a large Danish renewable energy company. And if she's listening, hello, Maya. But you know, she was the kind of game changer for me in terms of promoting me in a role where I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But she believed in me for who I was. And I was like, oh my God, this is like, I never experienced this at school, you know, where I was in like set 7 out of 8 for maths. Still got straight A's in my A-levels, by the way, but that's what happens when you send your kid to a ridiculously competitive school. But it damages your mental health to be in the bottom set or next to bottom set of every subject, even if you are intelligent on paper. And then to have life adversities thrown in your way, families torn apart and heartbreak and all this kind of stuff, like it changes you and it makes you crave things to kind of make yourself feel whole again. And so yeah, the more we're talking about this today, the more it's making me think there's probably something in that the experiences I've had since that really rough patch in my life, I've always been looking for people to help me be safe.
Well, they do say that your informative years shaped your rest of your, I mean, Susan Lavelle, who I worked with at the BBC for years, used to say, I've got this idea, you know, think of an age, so, you know, you're 55, let's just say, shall we? And then you think about what happens if you take away the 50. And she did this on me. So we took away the 50 and it was left with the 7. And for me personally, a lot changed in my life when I was 7 that I won't go into because this podcast's not about me. But the point is it completely and utterly, I believe, changed the course of my life. And therefore, you don't necessarily accept that or understand that till you move back. But taking away from me, I think, I mean, you touch on a lot of things. You touch on well-being. I love the way you talk about your discipline. And we're not here, I know we weren't here to talk all about that, but there's something that's so important now out there, particularly. And we do a lot of well-being sessions at Women in Change for Women. In fact, we're actually putting in more now. And that sense of the opportunity to, it's allowed now. You know, I don't, Annette knows this because we work together occasionally. I don't have a meeting on a Monday until 9:30 because I have my personal trainer on a Monday and a Saturday at 8:30, right? I know, Annette, you are a massive horse snubber and you ride a lot and that's really important to you, but that is the non-negotiables. There are non-negotiables in our life. And I think the acceptance, particularly post-COVID, where you can say to me, actually, Lou, or Annette, not coming on this podcast till 2:00 because at 1:00 or at 12:30 every day I do X. Nobody sniffs at that now.
No.
It's almost like, good for you. Wow, that's great. You know, Sarah Barlev, the CEO, has said to me, I've just got to become more Lou. because every time I say I'm going to go to the gym, I do something else. But I've got to just say that's it. So I love your discipline, actually.
Oh, right. I wouldn't describe myself as disciplined, but that's probably part of the...
What routine? Is it discipline? Is it routine? Yes.
Probably part of why, because I don't see it as being disciplined, I just see it as being myself.
But it's how you staff well.
Discipline, then they're probably less likely to do it because it seems boring and it seems rigid. But when you focus on the output, not the input, so you focus on how it's going to make you feel, like, do I like sometimes going to the gym and doing certain exercises that actually feel quite painful to my body? And I'm like, oh, this is really uncomfortable. I don't enjoy it, but afterwards I feel amazing.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, I feel like I really did a really good workout and I feel just this endorphins rushing through me. I just feel really good. But at the time, it's awful. And so it's easy to run away from those things. Meditation is another one. Like, I meditate a lot. And even just mini meditations on the train and stuff, like, is it at the time something that, you feel uncomfortable? You're like, people are going to be looking at me and you're like, I'm falling asleep, I'm not paying attention, whatever. People judging what you're doing. But actually, you've got to put you've just got to put yourself first and what you need to get out of that situation. And yeah, it's not always easy, like, especially with having a young child. Like, sometimes I have to say to my wife, like, oh, I'm going to have to take 5 minutes to go and do X, Y, Z because I'm in that red zone where I'm like dangerously close to losing it. And so there is a reality side to being someone who, like, classifies as neurodiverse. The reality is it's not just like, oh, I wake up on some days I feel sad. The reality is that I have to be disciplined, otherwise I can't operate in a way that is necessary to do my best. And that's unfortunately part of the kind of, I don't know whether you'd classify it necessarily as a disability, but it certainly can be really...
Superpower, by the way, on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. But, there is another side to it. It makes me feel a little uncomfortable, if I'm honest, sometimes, where people just talk about it as being superpower because it takes away from the pain and the... technicals. So it's like there's a superpower side. Don't get me wrong, like, it makes you incredibly... Well, I mean, I like to attribute, that's why I do a lot of my... stage work and stuff. I like being, I like making other people like enjoy an experience, like entertaining people and my team having fun. And I put a real emphasis on that, probably more than many people in my position would.
I think it's really interesting though that it's become that level of discipline and well-being is attributed to neurodiversity, where actually probably every single leader, every person should be doing that, because as you said, it helps you to operate at your best.
Yep.
And really that's what we should be bringing to our teams, particularly in a leadership role, to say, I need to be here to show up for you. And if I can manage myself and do these things, which means that my brain is at its full capacity, then you are helping your team. Yeah, and it does make you think as well of maybe that's why you've been attracted to change and change management.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of those skills that you clearly have are so important. And I know you and I spoke when we spoke originally about sort of capability around change, but it just, what you were just talking about really got me thinking, and it plays back into a conversation that Lou and I had with someone earlier, some of those skills. And change is hard. So you need that sense of humour or that piece of entertainment. You've got to meet people where they are. I mean, we were talking about this earlier, but you've got to be able to say, where are you at the moment? Where are you in this change journey? Where are you feeling in terms of work? And you will clearly spend time doing that, and you bring people into your team who can do that, so that you can then say, okay, how do we then help you? How do we move you into a position where you're ready, willing, able to make a change? Yeah. And I can really see how some of your experiences have helped you to get to this point in your career. You
need to meet people toe to toe and understand where they are. And unless, I'm not saying everyone who's a great change leader needs to have necessarily been, in a really dark place or really manically high place, but I think it helps. I think it helps because I think if you can relate to someone who is feeling incredibly nervous, anxious, upset, worried, all these various, and you can actually relate. You don't need to tell them that you relate, but you can project what that might feel like for people. You can then create strategies in your change approaches that mitigate some of that in a way that someone who's just looking at it as a textbook exercise of like, well, my training in change management told me that we do X and then Y and then Z and then the change is successful. Actually, if you can put yourself in the shoes of your audience in like rough personas, which kind of comes back full circle to why women in my team, because I can't complete every persona in my own self. So when I've immediately looked for the next personas that I can't fill in the gaps for, inevitably being female is one of those gaps for me. And there's loads of other gaps, like loads, like we're saying, in the whole DE&I space, there's loads of other gaps. And the other thing that you mentioned that resonated that I wanted to touch on, in terms of that empathy and understanding and ability to kind of build that psychological safety and get the best out of people, is also coming into that kind of flexible working discussion, which is probably one of the other topics that
we're going to go. Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing that I know my team appreciate, and I know I appreciate from my boss, is understanding that life happens. So coming back to what you were saying before about how, putting your well-being first and not necessarily having to start work at 8:30 every day. Who cares? Like the outcome is what you're there for.
Yes, yeah.
As long as my team are showing up for all their respecting other people's time, not, I'm in the gym so I missed my meeting with friends.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Being respectful and mindful. As long as you're doing that, I will only care ultimately about whether two main things for me when it comes to review time is like, is that person happy and enjoying what they're doing? And am I happy that their output is, it's like what and how, like, are they really nailing it on both fronts? And a really important part of that is that they feel like they can embed their work in their life rather than work feeling. I think if work feels like work every day, every week, every month, it doesn't last very long.
Well, they won't stay.
No, they don't stay. And the reason why you stay, like people say, you don't leave a job, you leave a boss. Well, I like to think that, a good boss is someone that you stay around for. And that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of at the moment is, touch wood, we've not had anyone lead the team for a good couple of years. And we're growing as a team. And so to retain that talent beyond the point where a lot of people would be thinking about career moves, especially with really highly talented people in a profession that is more and more in demand. That is definitely for me a metric of building a winning culture, is like retaining top talent. That's like the thing I'm for sure most proud of. And I know a big part of that is me having enough of an understanding of what women go through at work that men maybe don't have to deal with, be that challenges before, during and after maternity leave, be that responses to personal relationships, family relationships. I'm noticing firsthand that women and men, they respond slightly differently, and then men respond differently within, I respond differently to my brother, and I'm sure you
yes
to your friends. So that understanding of knowing that everyone needs a different level of understand, like empathy. I feel like the longer I have this team in place and work, the more life experiences we're going through together, and I'm actually seeing like the full cycle of all the things that life throws up. And so that kind of keeps us stronger and stronger as well, because the more they see that I have their back and I see that they have my back, it's just a really, really like amazing feeling to go through those life experiences together, like marriages and kids and just so much stuff that men and women go through. But of course I won't ever experience it firsthand as a woman, but I kind of do vicariously experience it through my team, because I really care about them and they care about me, and we share a lot.
And I know. But
as much as we want to share with one another.
Well, it's interesting because when you and I were talking about what time you were going to come on the podcast, we were on a Zoom or something like that, and it was the day of one of the riots, because obviously you had quite a few riots. And we got one sort of a good segue, and Leo, who's I must just say a big thank you to Divine Media, who are here supporting us to build this podcast today. But we were talking about the riots, and I was saying we would talk about what questions we would talk about, and then we got into the diversity, and then you said, and this is the best segue now into hybrid. No, you just said, well, it's interesting if we're going to start to talk about hybrid, because here we are in a situation right now where we're talking about the fact that I've got a diverse team. the fact that Tesco, and I know lots of other organisations, so I'm not just picking on Tesco, but we were just mentioning, saying that you have to be in the office 3 days a week now. And by the way, there's riots, so we've picked a tenor will do that in the middle of the riots. And clearly, people that from a diverse background at this moment in time to get on a train or to leave their house or to maybe just go to the bakery feels an enormous challenge. All of that coupled together, and you've mentioned empathy, psychological safety, balance. I'm picking out all the words that have been used so far on the podcast. That's a tough job for you.
It's tough. And do you know what's been really eye-opening to me is when I've raised those scenarios with, like say the power of LinkedIn, actually just seeing people's posts and how different the responses can be from different audiences around that topic. I gravitate towards that natural empathy, desire to understand, and genuinely just trust that my team know what's the right thing to do, and we'll have a really level-headed conversation about it. And if we decide as a team, like we did maybe that week that we spoke, we're going to cancel our team meeting we would do to have this really fun get together, predominantly about social rather than work. So everyone was really looking forward to it, and we put, everyone got the time carved out, and it was clearly though mattered to, especially a couple of people within the team. It mattered so much that they wanted to not go ahead with it. The second that we realised that, it was no one even batted an eyelid. It was a foregone conclusion, right, immediately. And what really struck me is that same day, that week, when I was looking around on, naturally like you do on LinkedIn, it somehow tracks your train of thought and shows you posts that are related to the exact thing that was going on in your life, which is quite scary. And and I saw posts that were wildly different in view, going, people are using it as an excuse not to do work, and everyone just needs to get on with it, and just 20, 30 years ago, this wouldn't have been a thing. We just need to man up and all this kind of stuff. I just can't relate to that at all, maybe I don't know, maybe I'm too far the other way, but my priority is always in the people feeling like they're bringing their best self to work. And I don't think anyone can possibly bring their best self to work being worried about the journey home. How's that ever going to be possible? So, no, whilst there is definitely, as you said, starting from next week, we are moving to 3 days in the office, but that will always be caveated with the safety of the team. That, for me, that's a non-negotiable.
Yes, absolutely. And that you said there about making people feel heard, and I think that's so important. I think when you are in any job, to be honest, particularly when you're embarking on change, you have to listen to people and hear them. And the two things don't always match up, but making sure you take that time to really analyse what you're hearing, make sense of it, move it forward, I think is absolutely critical. And clearly you and your team do a lot of that.
Yeah, and it maybe at the moment, maybe it's slightly easier. I mean, I guess I give myself too much of a hard time, but maybe it's easier because we are predominantly female team. Maybe it is easier to come to an agreement over things because we've got a strong persona type in the team that is female dominated. Maybe that means that maybe that means for me as a leader, maybe it's slightly easier to come to a unanimous decision than if I had, a lot of different viewpoints of that. But like I say, I don't know if that is the case because I don't know any different. I don't really care, if I'm honest. What I care about is the fact that my team is happy, is safe, and the diversity that we've also injected into the team since I took over this role has been building out our India presence as well. And then again, when that becomes, I've now got a bi-weekly session with that team in the diary where all we talk about is what's going on in India at the moment. Because I don't read the India news. I don't get that on BBC. I don't get that on my feeds. So it became really apparent to me that if I'm going to show my India team the same level of psychological safety and empathy and all the things I think are critical to being a good boss, then you've got to be able to understand that, like you're saying, you've got to understand and be able to talk in a language that people resonate with. If I just keep banging on about the riots in London and my journey and other people, they'll be going, well, he's not showing much consideration for me and what's going on in my life. So I think for people listening to this podcast who are not based in London or based in other countries around the world, or even more like myself, have got teams that are becoming multinational, I think it's so important to spend the time educating yourself on what's going on in those countries. Just saying you're psychological safe ambassador, and it doesn't mean you've got to put in the effort as well. And really, for me, it just comes naturally because I want to. I think if someone isn't naturally feeling that way, they should make themselves do it, because you can't build trust if you don't make the effort to try to build those bridges. If you just lazily go into it, so I'm being myself, that won't necessarily always get the best out of people. You've got to make a conscious effort to try and understand them.
Again, it's meeting them where they are.
Where they are, exactly. And going there, like I can now go there, try go there at least once, twice a year. Put in, for me, having a young family and stuff, that is a challenge, like going over there, and it's
sort of around the corner.
For people in my team as well, who are, whether they're new mums or whether they're looking after elderly parents, or like everyone's got life. And so just expecting people to drop everything and do XYZ workshop in India for work, that's out that means to people. And my first question whenever my team's ever asked to do anything is like, are you okay with it? What's it going to mean for you? What's it going to mean for your life? Not just to see it as, well, this is your job, Lou, so get on with it.
Yeah, but that's quite a different view. And again, I do think that it goes back to the conversation around being an empathetic leader, being understanding and having diverse cultures, whatever they may be, male, female, whatever. But that sense of, and I feel very akin to you, because anybody that's worked for me, I'm sure, would say to you the same. I'm very much that person. In fact, I wrote on LinkedIn the other day when somebody says, what happens when you're not having a good team building day? What do you do? And I just put, I invited all my people over to my house, and we just do it every summer. And in fact, when I left, first thing people said at my leaving do is, where's the August event going to be? Because it almost became a thing. And I think that, and it was about having fun, and it was about getting to know each other. And I do think that, the one good thing, and we talked on we're recording a few podcasts at the moment, and one of the things we're talking about is that sense of when you can really bring difference into places where you can be fun, actually really enjoy yourself. And I think a lot of that changed after COVID, that people understood what their work-life balance wants to be. And I saw something written the other day, another article, it said, I'm not going out for drinks with you after work because I don't get paid. And there was still companies that think like that. Whereas we would go out and we're like, a drop of a hat, wouldn't think about it.
So, absolutely.
But the fact that I'm still reading that employees think, I'm not coming out after 5 o'clock with you, Chris, because you're not paying me. It's sad.
It is sad, but that's why you've got to hire. Like I put a post out there commenting on something like that the other day, which was, people should only work for cultures that they align with.
Oh, totally. Or about the values.
And then moan about it.
Yeah.
And it's like them off on LinkedIn. Go somewhere else.
Yeah. Totally.
You're not forced to do that job. So the great thing is, in today's world, in London and in the UK and most countries now, there's so many options of what kind of work you can be doing. You don't have to go to an office 9 to 5 every day, go to the pub, have laddie, pub drinks, and that is an option. If you want that
you can do it.
Exists.
I think more and more as well, people are expecting their organisations to be purpose and values led, and to actually be purpose led and values led. And then if they turn up and the organisation doesn't live the values that they thought they had, it's a deeply uncomfortable place to be. Deeply uncomfortable, and it's really damaging for people's mental health.
And the thing, I've used this expression way too many times in my career, but the recruitment process to me is a bit like going on a few dates and then getting married.
Like that.
Yeah, but it is, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Putting myself in that mindset that you just described in it, which is like, you've got 2 or 3 half-hour conversations with a handful max of people who are probably in between calls, in between things, and let's face it, putting on a version of themselves, which is their interview. And you're meant to make a decision in that moment as to whether that's the company you want to start your career with, whether that's the company you want to leave your current job to join, or whether it's a company that, you are sacrificing money for your commute or whatever the inconvenience is, time away from your kids that you don't have to do at the moment. And you're expected to make that decision within half an hour. So for me, it's about coming back to that quote I was saying at the beginning from my best friend, Stephen Bartlett. He had saying, would that move your culture forward? I think it's so important that hiring managers take the initiative to think on behalf of the potential employee as well, to try I don't want someone to come into my team because it solves a problem for me, but potentially causes a problem for them. Because ultimately, if they join 6 months later, they leave. I'm net negative in terms of the impact, because that's a waste of time, money, effort, and cultural fractures within the team. So you want every hiring opportunity to be like a home run. So you have to put the same amount of effort in as if it's like you only hire that year. Not, I've got 3 vacancies, let's just quickly get some people in. Those vacancies for those people that's 60% of their hours of their week. It's a big decision. Don't spend that half hour staring at some slides that you've got for your next meeting and asking some.
But Chris, it's a two-way. I think a lot of companies, and it's definitely, there's a whole program here and another podcast on the changing face of HR, and we're actually doing. It's a bit of a plug, sorry, but we are doing it at the summit in November. We've actually got a company called Curve coming to talk about the changing face of HR.
Great.
So do watch out for that. But I am really struck now by, it's not about us hiring you. It's about you deciding whether you want to work for us. And that is an absolutely huge shift. And I've said this story a couple of times, but I somebody I know, I won't say who she is, working for a top law firm in the world right now, asked how long, she's an associate lawyer, how long will it be till I'm a partner? They said 10 years.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So she went, no, because I'm 31. And they said, well, it takes 10 years. And she said, well, is no way you can match that, get any better with that? No. So she goes to the second most successful law firm in the world. She actually has to do 6 or 8 interviews, nightmare. You can imagine the process.
Yeah.
And then they say, yep, we definitely want you for the job. And she says, well, let's see. I want to be a partner. How long is it going to be till I'm a partner? They actually said 2 years, given her track record of where she is now. Fine. So she goes, right, I'll give you 5 years. And in return, you're going to freeze my eggs, and I'm going to do all the fertility stuff before I join you, by the way, so that I know it's in the bag. Freeze my eggs, and then I'll join you. And she starts in a couple of weeks, and she's down in Harley Street somewhere. Oh, I promise you, she's actually there now doing this thing. I know, and I just think, wow. Yeah. I don't know there's many young girls out there today that have done that deal, but that is what's happening. That is that generation, 30-year-old generation today in 2024 that are saying, actually, let me decide how I'm going to work for you. Yeah. Give me what I want, great, but actually I'll still decide. And that is and she actually went back, by the way, to the other company and they still said no. So very interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Very interesting.
I think, you're right. It's a two-way street. Everyone's got to be on their A game to get the best out of the situation. If you want the best talent or if you want the best employer, you've got to put in, do all your homework and figure out also like that. What that makes me think is that there's a certain set of circumstances that's what good looks like for me. I want to achieve this by this time, and that means X, Y, Z, whether that's money or, like you say, life choices along the way. People need to make sure that they're asking all those questions up front before they commit to something, and then realize later on that they feel like their company has forced them to make a bad choice. Because that's what you see on LinkedIn, right? There's a lot of, like I said, people blaming the culture of the company for not aligning with their values. It's like, did you do your diligence?
Yeah, and you're not handcuffed here, by the way. I used to say that a lot to people where it works for me when they know. Just don't have to be here. It's a choice.
No, totally. So the other thing that just popped into my head that was sort of, and I could imagine when we talk about this topic of psychological safety, and when we think about people, and that I know there are people out there who hear that term and they think, oh, we'll come to work and we like cuddle each other, and we're all very like we're very like, we're all mates and everything's great and we're all very happy every day. I think it's really important to highlight that being a great team and being, especially like being a good leader, it comes with making really difficult choices as well. And that is a really hard thing to do when you're trying to build a culture that is built around psychological safety and being friends, like work friends, you know, kind of building friendship and trust. It doesn't mean that everyone at work has to be your friend, but I know there are a lot of people in my team and my surrounding team that would describe themselves as friends, but you're still at work and you've still got to sometimes you've got to do things that might not be aligned to what that person had in mind. That's when things can be really difficult, but that's where I see myself really challenge myself to do what is the best in that situation.
We work with a lot of leaders and coach a lot of leaders who are going through exactly that. Yeah. And I think particularly younger leaders who for the first time are stepping up and maybe they need to restructure their organisation because it's growing too much, or they're having to make difficult decisions. They've inherited a team that's not the right team. But they've always created and fostered this environment of really strong psychological safety and trust and getting to know the team. And people say it can be very lonely being a leader. And those are the situations where it can be very lonely being a leader.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And where it's very important to explain why this is happening so people can try to get on board with it, even if it means a difficult decision for them. Yeah. But also to hold on for yourself of why this is happening. Yeah. Why are we doing this? Why is this better for the team as a whole? Because it's going to mean that ultimately the team can grow, can develop, can achieve what you want to achieve. But also why it's probably better for those people who are maybe having to move on. Yeah, totally. Because it could well be that they won't fit in that new team and they will get to that point where they are unhappy, they're feeling unsafe, they're feeling exposed.
And once you get through those points, that is when you really build deep kind of trust and even more of a bond with people, because you realize that not only have you endured the good times together and kind of gone and, oh, look, you know, when you go through the difficult times, be that a difficult decision or just a really difficult program, difficult change, that you're a difficult stakeholder that is understandably upsetting someone. When you get through that together, that's when you really, like any relationship, right? It's great during the honeymoon period, but you know, how's it going to be when you're in the trenches? And if you can get through that, that's when you really feel like, we can take on anything together. And sometimes that does mean decisions that people look at on the face value and go, oh no, that's not the right thing to do.
And let's be honest, Chris, working in change programs, you hit that point. You always have. I find you have that honeymoon period at the start of the program when people are going, this cool, something's changing. And then the reality hits and you hit that resistance. And that's where I think as a change team, it is important to foster that feeling of safety, but also of fun and a home base where you can go. And I'm sure sometimes you probably have conversations with your team going, oh my goodness, how are we going to get through this? You probably have times where they're coming to you in despair going, where do I go next with this? You know, I've just had a really difficult meeting. And you've got to have that safety and you've got to have that ability for them to come to you and say, something's not working. What do we do?
And there's the stuff, my team and I really resonated with a model that was the spheres of influence. Like stuff you can influence, the stuff that just happens that you have to accept.
Totally,
And that, when you process stuff in that manner, I think it enables you to sort of, and call it out as a team and say, this is something that we can't influence, but we need to have each other's backs. But say, for example, there's an economic downturn in the UK and it impacts everyone's budget. Well, there's not very much you could do about that, but you can have each other's backs throughout. Likewise, there's stuff that you can have an impact on, and it's really important that you actually say these things out loud. Don't just implicitly assume that everyone in your team is aware that that's what you're thinking. You've got to be prepared to sometimes just go back to the basics of life. So this is something as a team that we can do something about. What do we want to do about it? Get in a room and really spend time talking about it, versus let's not waste time getting on a call talking about stuff that we can't.
Exactly.
Another place to use time really effectively.
Well, Chris, we are out of time, but I just want to say this has been a really fantastic conversation. We went down, we had lots of places we were going to go, and we went down even further. Firstly, thank you for your honesty. I think it's always difficult to talk about personal things, and I want to acknowledge how grateful we are for that. And I think it just shows how empathetic you really are, actually, generally as an individual.
Well, thanks. Yeah.
So thank you for that, and just bringing your energy here today. Really taking us a walk round the team at Tesco's. Congratulations again, because it was a fantastic awards. I mean, I can tell you how great, for those of you who are listening into the podcast, how great they were. We actually almost had to stop the awards for the loudness and the noise from the outside photo room, because they were just so excited. It was a great night. It was a very good night. And that was, an enormous, difficult category, because you were up against two other amazing organisations who I'm pleased I wasn't a judge there.
No, I'm really grateful for the opportunity. And thank you for having me today. It's been great. And hopefully what I've discussed, is of benefit to people. And if it inspires them at all, then people can reach out.
As our motto says, women in change, we're uniting women to create impact in the world, but we can't do it without our male allies. And they were sitting here today with us, one in particular, Christopher T.S. Harvey from Tesco. I was really struck by his openness. I was struck by how in touch he was with who he is, but also the women that have shaped him, the fact that he gravitates constantly to work for women. The fun, the discipline, the well-being that he brings, not just to work, but to his own life. How he carves out time for well-being. How he looks at his neurodiversity, something I hadn't expected to get into on the podcast, but interesting, particularly myself as a dyslexic thinker. I really loved the fact that we got into that deep conversation about the changing face of HR. What is it going to be? How are we going to employ people? How are they going to choose us? He really talked about as well his deep understanding on cultural differences and the need totally on everything that we do, whether it's at Women of Change, whether it's at Tesco or in any other business, about creating a culture that people want to join, that they want to come and make a difference in, that they want to be their authentic selves, and that they want to build together and listen deeply. I hope that you took some really good takeaways, not just food from Tesco, but some really great ideas from Chris, and to also say a big thank you to Chris for being such a big supporter of Women in Change. Thank you for listening to our first podcast. We hope you'll join us for the next one.